on my profile. I'll go back. So, how are you?
I'm doing, for a pandemic, I'm doing okay. How are you?
It's been a challenge. No, of course. I mean, I think the last time we connected was at the beginning of the pandemic. I can't even remember now.
Well, I actually got to talk to you 2 weeks ago, but yes, we've.
The last time we did a live together.
Oh, yeah, it was for the salary.
Yeah.
So I think it was like April, May.
Yeah. So it was about a year ago. And there's just a lot happening. And we connected recently again to talk about, what are we going to do for International Women's Day? What can we do? What's really happening at the community level? So we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's great. And also for anybody that's watching, if you have questions, just leave them in the comment, or whatever
Do you see,
comment.
can you see the comments? I don't
I
know where the comments
Yes, I have it up on my Facebook,
are. Okay,
or
cool.
on my what is it, on my phone. Sorry
No,
guys, I'm technically challenged. So um also I've had a ton of coffee, so I might be a little
super
jittery.
jittery. My husband this morning, he's like, how much coffee did you have this morning? I was like, not enough. I don't know.
Seriously. But for those of you who don't know, this is Noora Shourab, and she is the founder of Hopes for Women in Education, which is our partner in Jordan. And they provide tuition for young women to go to college. She is also the co-founder of City Soap, which some of you have gotten as gifts from me, but it provides employment to some of the women in the refugee camp. Nora, do you want to talk a little bit about Hopes for Women and why you started it and how it's had to shift
Yeah,
this
I
year?
mean, it's been a decade since we've started, and it's amazing to think and look back at the fact that we've been doing this for almost a decade. So we provide educational support and scholarships and workshops and skill development and mentorship to refugee women across Jordan. In particular, we work at the one of the most marginalized refugee communities in Jordan, which is the Gaza refugee camp, where the majority of people live under, the basic living standards. A lot of them are the reason I think as well that this refugee camp in particular is most marginalized is because they don't have citizenship, they don't have an ID number, which limits them in terms of their ability to, I guess, scale and grow and enter the job market. So there's a lot of limitations from that end. And it's almost like this forgotten community that we really want to provide hope and support to. So Hopes for Women in Education started about 10 years ago. And out of that, we have a women's center where we run multiple different workshops. We actually have a library that we launched a couple of years back now, with Beirut and Beyond, through funding supported through Beirut and Beyond. And unfortunately, the physical library is inaccessible now because everything's turned virtual with the pandemic. But we've had to make some major changes in the last year. And it's been really challenging because a lot of these community-based projects are no longer kind of at the availability of these communities that are just so in need of some of this work that we're offering on the ground. At the Hope City Women's Center in the camp, we also provide employment opportunities through my social enterprise, which is the City Social Enterprise. Some of you also know it as City Soap. If you don't, go to citysoap.com, or you can just search City and hopefully you guys can check it out. We do sell across North America, and the idea is to sell handmade artisan products that are obviously made with impact and are made to provide employment opportunities to these refugee communities, really thinking beyond aid and thinking how can we empower communities to become financially independent, to now start taking a hold of their financial freedom in a way, right? Like by creating job security from the skills that they are learning, and then also applying those skills towards kind of tangible goods. But the reason I wanted to connect today, and I think it's such a pivotal time, being International Women's Day, being it's an anniversary of a year of the pandemic, it's to talk a little bit about the impact that the pandemic has had on marginalized and refugee communities. In particular, those that you don't really hear in the news, right? And in the past year, and also most recently, we have just been so heartbroken to have actually lost some of our community members that we work closely with. City recently lost an artisan member who was impacted. She was immune compromised, and she recently lost her life. And it was such a heartbreak for us, but we also realized that the impact of her loss had a significant it took a lot out of us, right? Like, it was a reminder of what loss looks like in the middle of a pandemic. And no doubt, I know a ton of friends that have lost loved ones immediately when the pandemic had hit, both due to COVID and also not COVID related directly, but not being able to be there that they would want to be. So I thought it was just such a relevant time to talk about mental health in these marginalized communities. We talk about mental health here in, I'm in Toronto, and I'm in a bustling city, and we talk about the impact of this pandemic and how it's had on like women and families. And we can't dismiss the fact that this has even caused a greater burden on those that are living day by day, that are dependent on, daily wages, that are dependent on aid. And what happens when everything shuts down and locks down? What happens to those people?
I think this is a good conversation to have, because it's something that I don't know that people really think about for refugee communities, let alone when there's a pandemic, but the mental health support that is needed just when you're a vulnerable community, right? When you are stateless. And we do, anytime I teach on refugees, I talk about the psychological features, because it's traumatic. So you already have this layer of trauma and insecurity because you're vulnerable, right? You're a vulnerable community without support, right? Without lifelines. Like, here there are services, unemployment, things like that. So you have that basis, but then let's add a pandemic.
You have social services to lean on, right? Like, you have something to lean on. For a lot of these communities, when the pandemic first hit, I don't know if you recall, but immediately, majority, I would say, or a lot of the workers off of the Gaza refugee camp are daily wage workers. And what does that mean? Daily wage means if you work today, you get paid today. If you don't work today, you're not getting paid today. So your ability to put food on the table was dependent on whether you could go out to work or not. When the pandemic hit and lockdowns were spread across the country, immediately all these thousands of daily workers, I think it was a little bit over 3,000 families that were impacted due to daily workers' inability to leave their home and immediately having to go into lockdown. Also noting that the limitation of social distancing, the limitation of accessibility for PPE wear, right? Like, proper masks, proper hygiene materials, that wasn't readily available. And so I know
even water in cases, clean water.
Yeah, and clean water is a huge thing, because I think we had talked about this previously, or I don't know if you've ever mentioned it, but like, Jagash camp does not have a proper sewage system. Sewage runs through the streets, and so you can only imagine the health conditions that can rise as a result of that, like not having clean streets and kids that walk around barefoot because they don't have, the proper necessities to have, full winter gear, for example. And these are minor things, but these are minor things that accumulate and become a bigger problem later on. And also going back to these like super compact communities and the trauma that they're already in, a lot of these families are multi-generational homes. And so you do have people living in the same household with immune compromised, people with chronic illnesses, people that are unable to get immediate support should they have COVID, which has been the case. We've been hearing it nonstop, not just here locally, but what happens in a refugee camp when it's super condensed, someone gets contracted, everybody gets sick, they don't have the proper facilities or ability to get the care that they need.
Right. And you're working with, like, when we think of a home in the camps, whether it be Lebanon or Jordan, you're talking a one-room structure in many cases for 6 to 10 people sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's no social distancing, right?
No.
It's not like you can isolate in a certain room, like you're all in the same room.
Well, I mean, if someone's ill, the entire family is immediately having to isolate. But what does that mean to the entire family that now does not have the means to go out and get, a daily wage to be able to provide for the family? There's an issue and the pressures and the anxiety around, I can't provide for my family. What if I lose my job? What if I can't explain this? What if I can't cover the bills? All these issues are accumulating and really causing a sense of rising stress factors to these communities that we're dealing with. And we saw it firsthand. We saw it from the feedback that we got from the beneficiaries that we work with. We felt it, and it's almost like we identified the fact that we need to step up. And yes, while Hopes for Women Education has been focusing on educational support, we felt that we needed to put a pause, almost not a pause that education wasn't important, but we also needed to make sure that everybody was in check, like they were okay, their wellness was okay, they were doing well in general. Like, are you okay? Right? Like we had to stop and just ask that question, like, are you okay? Beyond, yes, we were making sure, even as Sitsi, like when the pandemic first hit, we said, we are making sure that not a single person will lose their job. We will make sure that, like, whether you're sick, you take days off, whatever it may be, you will still get paid no matter what. So it wasn't so much an issue of, oh, I could lose my job if I stayed home, but it was more than that. We figured that there were pressures on these women that we were working with that really had an impact on their overall wellness. And it just, when we lost our artisan last a couple of weeks back, it just almost was this shock, this reminder, like, we need to check up on our team. We need to make sure everybody's okay.
But it was after a long year. I think that's what was so painful. And it was painful for me to get the news because I knew this person, and I knew her place at the center as well.
Yeah.
She was an important person. And I think when I think on it, it's like been a year of stress of trying, not only supporting themselves, right, but then seeing what's going on in the community. Like, are people eating? Because if they can't work, they don't eat, right? So on top of that, it's the stress of your community. Then it's healthcare concerns. Like, if you get sick, then what happens, right?
Yeah.
How do you afford healthcare? Do you get tested? Because, I know that's a big thing in the Middle East right now. Like, do you get tested? Because if you get tested, then what if you're positive? Then what happens? So you have all of these.
And what kind of care is available to you too, right? Because that's another thing in terms of the type of care and service that's available. Your ability to get tested could be available through government support. Like, I know right now the Jordanian government has free tests available. But like you said, okay, if I test positive, what does that mean on my family? What does that mean in terms of moving forward? Who's following certain protocols? And it's just a big toll. And there are people that just either will refuse to get tested because it could be detrimental to their day-to-day, and putting a stop is just not realistic. And also, the people that are asymptomatic, that are walking around with COVID, that have no idea and are going on with their day-to-day, and they're impacting the livelihood of those around them. So for sure, I think this pandemic has created definitely a shift in how some of these communities are able to go about their days. And, you know, in a complete lockdown, I know in the beginning was impossible. Right now, the situation obviously has eased, and it's going between temporal lockdowns, I would say, or just like the you know, on, I think it was last Friday, they went on another lockdown just to kind of make sure because of the new variant going around. But we've been super conscious, and we're now having very serious conversation about the wellness of our staff, not just from a health perspective, but are you mentally okay? Do you need psychosocial support? You know, and moving away from like you're sick and you need psychosocial support from that end, right? Like I'm okay, I have nothing wrong with you. It's like, yeah, you have nothing wrong with you, but I don't have anything wrong with me too. But this pandemic has caused incredible like stress on myself. And I feel like it's important to have these open conversations, not just with ourselves as you know, caregivers or as an organization, but also as you know, providing some sort of support to the community on the ground. What are we doing to help make sure that they're being acknowledged and they're being heard and seen?
And I think that's really important. And like, we don't really talk about the mental, like I said earlier, we don't talk about the mental health of refugees, particularly women. And there's not a lot of organizations actually working on the mental health of refugees, particularly Palestinian. I've seen some with Syrian because they have the, you know, immediate trauma. But with the pandemic, so let's talk about the pandemic and mental health, right? We know like what it's doing to us. Like I can tell you what it's doing to me. And some
How are you? How
oh,
are you doing?
not, you know, not great a lot of days, right? It's the same thing, like, you know, making choices of, do I leave the house? Do I not leave the house? Working from home all day long, and being isolated. And actually, for an Arab community, being isolated is probably the absolute worst because they're communal, way more than being, you know, North Americans, way more.
Yeah.
Um, so I think, you know, when we talked, it was a no-brainer to me that we would support a mental health program for women, particularly for the staff of Hopes for Women, because one, you identified the need after having a death in the community, and what it's doing to them emotionally and physically. Um, but did you pull up stats on refugees, or is it too early to try?
Yeah, so I was telling you that I was actually trying to pull out statistics about the condition and the mental health of refugees. I know that the GIZ in Jordan was doing a program around psychosocial support for marginalized communities, particularly refugees. I know they do a lot of work in general with the Palestinian refugee community, but also with the Syrian refugee community in Jordan. But again, this is very early study. They launched a pilot psychosocial support workshop early end of last year, I want to say, and they're looking now to expand it, and they're appealing for funding, particularly around, you know, this need, because again, the ability to easily interact, and you know, having virtual Zoom calls of mental health is even difficult because a lot of these communities and these like the women that we're dealing with, they don't have internet at home. They don't have accessibility to have, like, you know, flap open their laptop and turn on, you know, and get on a Zoom call. It's not as easy for them. So the inability to be able to meet physically is also very challenging, and it's putting a lot of pressures on people. So if you don't have access virtually, like, at least I tell people, sometimes you're in a lockdown, but you know, you have your Netflix, you have your Wi-Fi, you can still work remotely for the most part. And a lot of jobs have transitioned, but some people, their job is exclusively reliant on physical trade, or like, you know, hands-on, face-to-face type of work, and it's impossible for them to transition to a virtual working environment because that's just not how they work. It doesn't fall under, you know, what they're capable of doing, and the resources available to them. And so we were even having a discussion like, what can we do in terms of support? And we realized like it has to be physical. It has to be a social distance, safe type of physical workshop where the women could see each other. It's also a reminder too that the community center that we work out of, a lot of the times being at the community center or being able to just go out and work is an out for them. There's no other out for them. They're not like walking up to a close by park to take a walk or a hike, in a close by trail like that. These options are not available to them, right? And so their ability to get some fresh air, let's say, is not is not an option for some of them. It's and some of the cultural barriers, if you're not going to work, you're not really going anywhere. And so and because going out means spending money that's not available. The ability to leave the camp area means taking a bus or taking a taxi. Where would they go? Could they afford it? It's not a matter of can you or can't, but it's just sometimes it's not feasible. There's too many challenges that come in the way they allow them. And when we talked to the team, we felt like they're like, we just need to breathe. We need to feel like we can get out. And, it's almost this feeling of being choked up. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's hard for us to understand, like it's almost impossible in many cases to be able to leave. Right. Because of the barriers that you said, but it's also social barriers as well. Like if you're a single woman alone, you're just going to go out and do what? Like,
Yeah.
and so part of when we were talking about a program for them is providing a safe place for them. I mean, and that's what I appreciate about the center. It provides a safe place for them. Right. And so how can we provide that? And the month of April is like the one nice month in Jordan. Like,
we were talking about it. We're like, well, how are we going to do this? And it has to be in an outdoor location. We wanted to offer an out for them, an ability for them to really, not just get out, but also have some sort of support at the end of the day. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
We were hoping to put together, again, this is definitely something that would be a pilot and a test to see how well it would do with our community, because we feel like, yes, we've never done something like this before, but we definitely are using this opportunity to really get feedback and see the impact of applying something like this. If, how well does this pan out once it's rolled out? You know what I mean? So we were looking at doing retreats that would include some psychosocial support directly to the refugee community. And the idea was that in addition to, having the ability to get out because of them being locked down for this entire year, so really creating a space for them to get out and interact as sisters and as community members. We also wanted to make sure that we had someone there that can create a structural program around talking about some of the pressures that they have been feeling, and as well about the loss of their colleague and community member, and their sister, their mother, their aunt, like someone that just was a representation of all those people, and have the ability to just openly grieve about it, openly just express their sadness. And so we wanted to create a space for them to do that. We knew that having something like this inside of the community center would be impossible given the size of the center, and given the fact that we didn't want a gathering of women inside a closed space like this, but also because we knew and felt like they were asking to have that out. And so that was kind of the visionary. And I know when we talked to the team about it, they were actually really excited and thinking like, this is great for you know, them to be able to connect again. Unfortunately, a lot of our team members, I think now, what are we in the second, third week? So a lot of them actually recently contracted COVID and they are actually recovering. So a lot of them, we actually closed our center for the past month or so because a lot of our team members had contracted COVID. Them and their entire family could not move. We tried as much as possible to provide them with remote support, but again, there's only so much you can do when you're halfway across the world and you're not able to be there for them. And because we know the not just the health tolls of having to experience COVID. I mean, I went through it with my family in December and it was, oh my gosh, it was exhausting. And I'm so grateful that we're okay now. But just having to know that your team members are also sick and not being able to be there for them. So this was definitely an opportunity for us to say, you know, we're so glad that you're well. Let's do something so that we can offer you the kind of support so that you could be okay. Like you, your wellness is just our priority.
I think, yeah, I keep saying that's important, but I think getting them out in nature, like any professional healthcare giver is going to tell you that nature heals, like to be out in nature. And especially for that community that's stuck in a camp, right? To get them out into nature and then having a professional run some seminars for them and help guide a time of grieving and give them tools to be able to move forward. And what's so important to me is keeping the health of leadership, of women in leadership, as a priority, because if they're not healthy, mentally, physically, whatever, then they're not going to serve their community well.
And that actually makes me think, because when I think of our leadership in the community, I look at, you know, some of the women that literally carry the weight on their shoulders and they're like, we're good, we're okay. And I think for so long, you talked about trauma, for so long, they were expected to continue to say they're okay, to continue to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders and not complain. And so because it's not a common culture to openly talk about, I'm not feeling well, or I'm a little stressed out, or I'm feeling anxiety, or, you know, whatever it is, I think it's important to talk about it. I think for me, when I think of it and I try to relate, like trying to create like an empathetic reaction is, you know, I know the pressures of having to go through anxiety. I've personally gone through anxiety myself, or, you know, have had anxiety attacks because of mass stress and pressure and not talking about it. And I felt, and I later learned that the more I didn't talk about it, the more pressure it had on me, and that the more I was willing to openly talk about having anxiety towards, you know, particular issues or too much pressure. And now I'm very vocal about it now, where when I'm anxious, I make it a point to ask for help. And I think we as women just hold a lot of burden on ourselves, right? We don't like asking for help. We don't like saying, no, we're not good. Like we're always, you know, like, and I mean, as caregivers, as women in general, like we carry the weight on our shoulders. And it's just so relevant, like with International Women's Day yesterday, and some of these conversations of, you know, the contributions of women on our community and how we need to make sure that they continue to stand strong. But how can they stand strong when their wellness and their very being is not okay?
Yes, and I do want to brag a little bit about Hopes for Women, because I've worked with a lot of organizations, right? I've been in the camps for 17 years now. So I've seen a lot. I know my Arabic should be way better than it is. that aside. But I've worked with a lot of organizations, and I will tell you, like when we set up the library, I was really tough on them. Like I'm a hard manager because I have high expectations of myself and others. And they, every time I asked, they rose up and accepted the challenge and did it. And so
we've talked about this too, right? We've talked about setting the standards high and not settling for just okay.
Yeah.
Because for too long, I think communities, marginalized communities, particularly refugee communities, it's kind of like, oh, well, what's really going to come out of them?
Right.
And we've seen that with the different projects we've launched. I've seen it with City. I've seen it with some of the reaction, like, you're really going to launch a company out of a refugee camp? And it's like, well, why not? Why can't the things that they make, why can't we take their craftsmanship, their ability to create something and raise up the bar? And I think it goes back to how we treat the communities at the same level, right, of expectation as others.
It's true. And I will say that one thing, and I do have high expectations of the staff because I know what they're capable of. And usually they go above what I'm asking. Usually.
You have to ask it. You have to raise that bar.
I do have to ask it. And I think that's why I'm so sold out, on this organization, because you guys are actually serving the community. I see women that have been mentored that are mentoring others. And I
think we talked about that what was it, a couple of years ago, where we saw one of the women that joined the scholarship program and how timid she was, and her growth and her ability to just develop and really just shine out of the box. And it was like shocking to see this blossoming of this woman that was just surprising all of us, not just with her knowledge, but like with her contribution of giving back. And I think the incredible thing that I see about the women at Hopes, and it's really just part of this partnership that we have together, is when we give to them, they just turn around and just give multiple times over to everyone around them. Yes. And they have this sense of gratitude, but also the sense of purpose to serve. And I think that's so important to touch on, because this is how this community is built, on this purpose to serve, on this purpose of how can I help not just myself, like this is a very, I care about my independence, my growth. I don't care about anybody around me. But when they grow, they're ones to grab those along with them and really make sure that the women around them, the community around them, is also benefiting from that perspective. And I think that's so inspiring and makes us want to continue to give. Like, oh wow, like we need to do more of this.
Yeah,
right.
They actually take responsibility. They take responsibility in their own lives and then the health of their community. And I've seen that over and over again, where I've seen the exact opposite, because when you're marginalized, you are a victim. And so you can live in that mentality. And yet the women on the staff actually are taking responsibility. And it's kind of ownership of your own life, even with the limitations in it. And that's why I think it's so important to support them holistically. Like, sure, yeah. Physically, we support people financially, educationally with the library, you're providing employment, but also it's mental health. Like, we have to start addressing these issues for women and give them a safe place, and at least give them the tools, and what they do with it is their choice, but at least offer the tools.
But also moving away from the point that you have to be sick to get mental health support, or you have to have some sort of problem to have mental health support. Yeah. And I think intervening early is a better sustainable solution to making sure that the wellness of your community is in check than to create like a crisis mode where, they're having traumatic experiences where they're unable to really recover from some of the stress syndromes that occurs due to, their mental health in general. And we're not here, and I've said this to my team, I might not be able to come in and solve any of your problems, but as long as I know that we're here asking you if you're okay, that we're here if you needed something and someone, again, the prevailing issues at the camp level is not going to go away tomorrow. But what we know that we can do is we can stand up as a global community and say, we are here. I'm a woman just like you are, and I'm standing beside you. And I'm telling you that, we can stand up for each other and make sure that we're okay. And beyond just grief and going on, addressing the loss of someone, I think it's important to stand with them, in their journey. And I think this is part of that journey.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's, I think for me, and I brought, it was the last time I was in Jordan. It was last February. It was the last time I traveled before everything blew up.
Oh my gosh. It
And
seems like a million years ago. I don't
it
know.
does. But I had a board member, and her husband was a former board member, and they were in the region, and they're like, "We want to go to Jordan. Will you come meet us in Jordan?" And I did. And for them to sit down with the staff and see what I see was super important because they were impressed with the work that they were doing. And I remember them saying, it's like, they're actually offering hope in the community just by what they're doing and just by who they are. And
Because they're challenging the status quo.
yes,
Because they're coming out and saying, we are tired with how we are expected to be. We're tired to live on the sidelines, and we really want to change the dynamics. We want to change the opportunities that are available for the communities to come and for students to come, for generations to come. And knowing the hardship that a lot of, that these again, we have to remember, and this is part of the history of understanding the camps that we work in, is that this isn't something that came up 5-10 years ago. This is a community that has been marginalized for decades, right? Some of them for 40 years, some of them for 50, 60 years. So we have to remember that this is part of an intergenerational trauma of being committed and literally locked up, not locked up, I mean, they can leave, but being identified as the refugees that they are, as the displaced people that they are. And it's a daily reminder of who they are. And it's a daily reminder that, of their loss. And it's part of that collective trauma, collective community trauma, but it's also for us, when I visit, I mean, I'm a Palestinian, my family is from Gaza. But I was, my situation is different. I grew up in the Gulf. I moved to Canada. I, traveled to Jordan doing my dissertation, and only was shocked to be like, how do I not know enough about this community? How do I not know about my own, about Palestinian refugees that live and that have been forced and fled, and really learning and diving into this intergenerational difference of the the trauma and the pain that comes with it, right? And it's not going away. It's not going to disappear. There are millions and millions of refugees that rely on aid, that rely on development support. And I think it's a responsibility to make sure that we know this history and we know the impact. And as new emerging refugee issues arise, what happens is a lot of the Palestinian refugees become old news. And old news also means the diversion of funds being directed to these communities where for decades they were dependent on them. And we created a dependency on aid, right? We created a community that was solely dependent on aid and was committed to, didn't have the opportunities to venture out, basically, right? And so when we think about the work that Hopes does, I remember when we started working, and this is a decade ago, I was shocked that there wasn't anything available. It was really coming in to fill in the gaps of saying, why don't we have enough of this available? Why aren't we offering peer support? Why don't we have a safe space for women? And that's when it was like, let's create it. Let's create it based on community demand, and let's create it based on voluntary efforts and committed members that wanted to give back to the community. And we saw it, the more we gave them, the more they really wanted to cherish and really continue to build what we had to offer. And so this offering of checking in on the wellness of our community is that very thing, is making sure that if we need to stop, we need to check on each other, we need to ask, are you okay? We need to make sure that despite this incredibly traumatic year for everybody, that we're okay, we're checking up, we're there for each other. And so that's really the essence at the end of the day. Yeah.
So that's why we committed to raising $3,000 for this project. And we're doing it this month of Women's History Month, but also International Women's Day, because we felt like this is the appropriate way to use this month, is to try to raise funds for other women. And so that's what we're doing. And that's the program we're going to have, is led by a professional, get them out into nature, and then offer them tools on how to move forward. So you want to give, you can go to BayRootenBeyond.org, go to our give page, and give a tax deductible.
Are you doing a Facebook donate, or like, is it going to be through the Beirut and Beyond page?
It's just Beirut and Beyond.
Okay.
And I did have a friend do a fundraiser for her birthday this past weekend. So we have altogether about 1,000 in, so we need about another 2,000.
Wow, we are a third into this. This is incredible, because I know that having this retreat and these workshops, these structured workshops for these women, will be so pivotal to make sure that they're okay, and to create the kind of support that, you know, almost a systematic like wellness check. Like, are we, you know, beyond just asking them, because we know that this is a community that bottles in way too much than they should handle.
Yep.
And we should, and I almost feel, I was telling you, I'm like, I can't believe that we haven't done this earlier. Like, I can't believe we haven't prioritized wellness and mental health issues at the forefront. Even when the pandemic first hit, it almost like, how did we not check in and make sure we do this earlier? And it's almost like sometimes we have to experience tragedy.
Yeah, but okay.
To realize.
But okay, but just remember when it started, and just trying to get people fed, right? Like, just making sure that they would stay alive. Like, that was, so I think, yes, like checking on mental health is important, but right when this started, like, it was just panic mode.
Yeah.
Of like I mean, and I don't like doing relief work, and that's not what we do, right? It's about creating opportunities, which is why I partner with you. But
it's always about, and it's about long-term solutions as opposed to short-term solutions. And you're right, when the pandemic first hit, if you remember, we did the food packages. We distributed over 1,000 packages to families, which was incredible. Like, the generosity of people like floored me. I was like, just when you thought it was going to get worse, it just, you know, you get this immense generosity from people. And I think it's a reminder of our collective humanity and this collective feeling of, we can be there for each other no matter what. We were all experiencing, you know, the similar difficulties. Yes, I'm in a different city than you are. I'm experiencing different issues. I'm trying to manage my 3 kids. People are managing their health issues. And, you know, I have my friend who, you know, had, you know, medical health issues. Everybody's going through their own trauma and their own issues. And I think to address it and talk about it and say, this is not normal. I think close by to my neighborhood, there's a big billboard when I'm driving by. I swear, this big billboard, whoever thought of it was just incredible. But it was like, this is not normal. It was a big billboard that was just like, this is not normal. This is hard. We're going to be okay. Like, let's just keep pushing. And it's not normal. We need to remind ourselves that this is not normal. This is very hard. And on top of the fact that these communities live in very difficult situations, we're adding an incredible barrier on top of them. So to offer them this sense of, we're here for you, let's make sure you're okay, not just health-wise, but in general, like your mental health is okay, that you're in check. I think that's a first step. And I'm so proud to have Beirut and Beyond kind of partner with us on this, because I feel like it's just a testament to the support that you guys have offered us to look at sustainable long-term solutions to really help the community. And I'm just so grateful.
Oh, well, I'm grateful. It's a privilege to work with you guys. I love it. So
I want to give you a virtual hug.
I know. Hopefully I'm going to get vaccinated in 2 weeks. So
oh my gosh,
it's going to be a game changer.
I don't think we're getting vaccinated till the end of the year. I don't know. Canada's getting it's on the slow path, slow train. We're on the slow train.
Well, I'm hoping it's a game changer and I get to travel.
Oh, yes, I think everybody has that on their list. Suzanne, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. I hope everyone can take a moment, if you can, to support this initiative and this fundraiser. We are a third away, like you said, to raise the funds we need to do this retreat, this psychosocial support and mental health wellness for our staff, and for the community members that we work with, for the women that we feel just need a break.
Yeah, so Facebook Live, thanks for those of you who have joined us. Next week, I'm on at 11 with a mental health professional talking about some of the psychological features that we're all facing in the pandemic, and then layer in refugees. So Noora might be back at the end of the month with me. And Noora, thank you again for your time and for everything.
Thank you. Honestly, God, I think the number one thing I try to do is make sure we tell the stories fairly and clearly. I think what I tell people is that the communities we work with don't have that channel. They don't have that ability to be able to tell their stories. And I feel like we need to elevate their voices in any possible way we can. And so if I can be a means to do that, then I'm grateful to even be allowed to do so. So thank you.
No, thank you. If you guys have questions, you can put them in the comment section and Noora and I can check and answer questions. I am going to do my best. I recorded this, so I'm going to do my best to upload this on Instagram, on IGTV. We'll see if I'm capable of that.
I think you should be. I think it should. Yeah. I mean, once you save it, you'll be able to do it.
We'll see. Like things.
But we're definitely. Yeah. I mean, feel free to ask us questions. Or if you have any issues or anything related to this that you'd like to learn more about, either DM Suzanne or DM me. Check out Hopes for Women's Instagram page, and Beirut and Beyond has updates on your Instagram page all the time, right?
And check out City Soap. Go to citysoap.com. I just gave a package away for somebody's birthday this weekend, and they couldn't believe how beautiful it was. It's beautifully packaged. It's a good product, and you're supporting refugee women in it. So go to citysoap.com or is it city.com or citysoap.com?
Citysoap.com. So SITTI. City means my grandma in Arabic. If you don't know, you can get Arabic lessons from Suzanne, maybe.
I can teach you how to, never mind, but I can teach you how to say it.
So citysoap.com. We actually have a page on International Women's Day. You can go check it out under the About section. And we really highlight some of the impact that we're doing on the ground. And we are promoting our City Millie gift box, where proceeds are going towards a scholarship education program. Just hopefully we can kind of push that forward in September when things kind of calm down a little more. And yeah, I mean, every single purchase helps us continue to create job opportunities that are long-term, sustainable, and creating self-reliance for financial independence for refugees. And that's kind of at the core of long-term planning to really help aid the community. Suzanne, thank you always for being so generous and so kind.
Oh,
I can't even tell you. Habibti. I look forward to the next time we can have tea together, Shai at the center, inshallah. It would be such a pleasure to see you again. It feels like way too long.
It is.
And I hope you are well and you're okay. And yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Noora.
Take care.
Love to you.
Bye.
Bye.